What's up, everybody? This is your boy Chris, so I bring you another edition of the Car Concierge Show Weekend Review. On this episode, we're going to bring you some exciting things that happened this week, including the exciting UFC last night, UFC 307, held out in Utah. We're also going to talk about the situation with Stellantis and how they're suing the UAW because the UAW is planning to strike. And last but not least, we're going to check out the port strike and how it ended so abruptly and why. First up, let's check out the UFC situation. So, it was a fantastic UFC 307 held out at the Delta Center in Utah over last night. Really exciting fights. We're going to start off with the fourth fight. We got a chance to see my man, Kevin Holland. He went up against Roman Dolidze. And it was an exciting fight. It ended in round one with a stoppage because Dolidze was dominating for a minute, but Kevin Holland came up with a rib injury towards the end of round one, and the doctor decided to stop the fight. He just couldn't continue. Seemed to be a really bad rib injury. So, Kevin, it might be time to start thinking about retirement, but we hope you for the best. We hope that it's not super bad rib injury and you can come back. Shout out to Roman Dolidze for winning the bout, and we hope to see more from him in the future. Next up, we got to see our former champion, Jose Aldo, and he stepped into the ring with Mario Bautista. And it was a great fight, a lot of back and forth. Jose was showing some of his great jabbing and great ability. Mario did get a couple of takedowns, and he did dominate a little bit on the feet as well. So, in the end, even though Jose came out with the crown on his head, Mario Bautista came out with the victory. Next up, the co-main event, we had a nice women's fight. Juliana Pena was going against Raquel Pennington. And I always say I don't spend a lot of time concentrating on the women bouts in the UFC, but this was an exciting one. And it was the first one that I saw that I really want to sit here and say that the loser, Raquel Pennington, was cheated. I thought she dominated the whole bout. I thought she was throwing the harder hits. She was getting the better striking. She knocked Pennington down a couple of times. And she ended up losing the bout by split decision. I think that they gave it to Pena because she did have a couple of nice takedowns on Pennington, but I personally think that Pennington dominated this fight and she should have won, but Juliana Pena came out on top. Kudos to her. And Raquel Pennington, please don't hold your head down. You honestly, to me, won this bout and you're going to be a champion once again. Last but not least, Alex Pereira put on a show as he got into the ring with Khalil Rountree. And it was an exciting fight for 3 rounds. They were going back and forth. Pereira was showing his power, was showing his youth, and Khalil Rountree was showing his age to some degree. And towards the end of round 3, Khalil was just drenched in his own blood. Pereira had really beat him up over the course of those 3 rounds. And towards that end, just kept on pounding to the point where at the end he hit him with a couple of really nice body shots and then a nice uppercut, and that was the end for Khalil. Dropped down and TKO in round 3. Awesome fight. Khalil really put up a fight. He could have been out in the first or second round, so he really drug it on to round 3, and that was when Pereira stepped it up and took him out. So, fantastic UFC 307 last night. Always a good time when we check out Dana White and the UFC anytime. So, all right, let's move on. Next up, we're going to check out Stellantis as they decided that they're going to file a lawsuit stopping the UAW from striking. Let's check it out.
Swift reaction from Stellantis after United Auto Workers here in Southern California threatened to go on strike. Their authorization vote could be the first of many across the country.
But the automakers already trying to stop them in federal court. Inland Empire Bureau Chief Rob McMillan takes a closer look at the growing showdown.
It was just over a year ago that workers at the Stellantis Parts Distribution Center in Ontario walked off the job and went on strike.
Our members are barely getting by, barely able to live the American dream.
Now, members of the United Auto Workers say they voted overwhelmingly to authorize a strike here again. This time over what they is Stellantis' failure to follow through on $19 billion in investments in the United States that they say would secure tens of thousands of good-paying union jobs. But Stellantis isn't exactly being subtle in its response to the union's vote, announcing that they're suing the union over its decision, filing a lawsuit in federal court. The company pointing out a provision in its agreement with the union saying, quote, due to the unpredictability of highly volatile vehicle markets, all of these planned future investments are subject to committee approval. In an email sent out to Stellantis employees, a company senior vice president saying, quote, the facts are indisputable. The transition to electrification is happening at a slower pace than expected. We knew that slowing consumer EV adoption could potentially delay our product launches and investment decisions. It's a dispute that has been building for months now, the issue taking center stage at the Democratic National Convention in August. Union President Shawn Fain slamming Stellantis.
Stellantis must keep the promises they made to America in our union contract. And the UAW will take whatever action necessary in Stellantis or any other corporation to stand up and hold corporate America accountable.
We've reached out to the UAW for comment and are awaiting their response.
All right, so this is nothing new. We didn't foresee this already. We had already talked about how this was probably going to happen. And we have to ask, who's writing these contracts? Who's reviewing these contracts? Stellantis has the upper hand. The UAW signed a contract that had all these stipulations that required all these quotas to be met, so that certain things that Stellantis will do for the UAW and for the factories, and it was a bad contract from the beginning. We knew it was a bad contract from the beginning when they were talking about the fact of, we knew it was a bad contract when people started losing their jobs after the contract went into effect. The contract was predominantly stated that majority of these jobs wouldn't be lost, but it has stipulations that if certain measurements weren't met at certain times, then these things are unavoidable. And they were unavoidable. So to the point where everybody's losing jobs at Stellantis. The factories that Stellantis promised that they would reopen, like Belvedere, are not reopening. All of the things that Stellantis promised are not coming to fruition, and they've already put it in the contract that they don't have to do it because the market share hasn't been met. All these requirements haven't been met. It's just it's a shit show for the UAW. It's the UAW has fallen so far, and now they tried to get into cahoots with the government to help them come across, and they did, but that only strengthens Stellantis' stand that they can do almost anything they want because they gave you everything that you wanted. And you signed a contract that stipulated if we give you all this, then we can do all this. It was just a super bad contract. UAW is suffering. They're going to continue to suffer. Stellantis is going to continue to be the corporator that it is, going to continue to sell all parts of this industry to the highest bidder, and the automotive industry is going to suffer because of it. It's horrible. The whole contract with the UAW put this all in motion to the point where everybody's losing their jobs. Everybody's upset. Nobody's getting what they wanted or deserved. And now lawsuits are just going to start flying and flying. And Stellantis has the upper hand because the contract, like they said, stipulates that all of these things that we promised you in this contract are based on certain things being met. And obviously they haven't been met. The suffrage has continued. All right. Let's keep going. We're going to talk about this port strike situation real quick. And it's too beautiful a Sunday for me to be sitting in here with y'all all day. So let's do that and have a good day.
We're going to begin with the breaking news overnight. A potential economic crisis averted. U.S. ports getting back on track this morning after dock workers struck a tentative deal to end their strike. NBC's senior business correspondent Christine Roman's been all over this story. Christine, good morning, and what are the details?
Yes, good morning to both of you. You know, starting today, tens of thousands of union workers will return back to work after heading to the picket line on Tuesday. It's good news because the shutdown could cost the U.S. economy up to $4.5 billion a day, and a lengthy strike could have led to higher prices and shortages of goods ahead of the holiday season. The union released a statement on Thursday expressing they had reached a tentative agreement on wages, and they've agreed to extend the master contract until January 15th. That's when they said they'll return to the bargaining table to negotiate all the other outstanding issues. So here's what we know so far. Sources telling CNBC that under this tentative deal, workers will see a near 62% wage hike over the course of 6 years. The union, remember, had originally asked for 77%. This increase would potentially raise the top longshoreman's wage to just over $63 an hour at the end of that 6-year deal. That's an increase from $39 an hour. Now, NBC News has reached out to the union for any more details, but have not heard back. Now, President Biden also reacting to this deal, applauding the news, applauding both sides for coming together to reopen these ports, stating that Thursday's tentative deal represents critical progress toward a strong contract.
Well, it's crisis averted for now, but it's kind of kicking the can down the road, and there are these outstanding issues, which sounds like trouble. So what does that include?
You know, one of the biggest concerns right now, guys, is port automation, which is still under negotiation. What we're hearing from the dock workers is there is a big urgency here to protect their jobs against this fast-moving technology. But you guys, the timing here is really important because we were already starting to see people kind of panic buying. You were starting to see skimpy store shelves in parts of the country because people were worried with COVID, the experience of COVID still fresh in their minds about shortages down the road. So you were starting to see some panic buying. Now these workers are back to work, and they'll start, working through this backlog now.
All right, so ended abruptly, and if you don't think that Biden or the government had something to do with this ending abruptly, you're sadly mistaken. You know that it was probably a phone call from Biden to the mob boss, as it were, of the union workers who knew Biden personally, and they all have his phone number, that we all understand that this is just a copycat of the situation that happened with the UAW and Stellantis and the Big Three. It's just a copycat. They're kicking the can down the road, and it's going to end up hurting the dock workers more than they think, because there's no stopping automation from becoming predominant in these situations. There's no way to stop companies from investing in the automation industry. It's think about the whole electric vehicle industry. They tried to stop that. It's not stopping. It's the future. It's innovation. It's technology. This is what happens. There's nothing. You just have to work around it. And I get it. I don't. No one likes change per se, and no one wants to, even have to worry about this type of thing. But the fact is that it's coming, and there's no really way to stop it. And this is just, like they said, kicking the can down the road. There's no situation that you could say where this is the end all be all of this situation. Computer tripping. Because they didn't get what they wanted. They didn't address the automation situation, which is the biggest thing, and they're not going to, because they know that that's not going to change. You're going to have to deal with this automation one way or another. Down, what do they say, 6 years? You could total of $63 in 6 years. That's really not very much. That's what electricians and plumbers make out of New York now. More than that. So it's still a sad situation, and it's not over. It's not over. We want to think it's over, but it's not. Real quick, we're gonna read what Automotive News, our favorite place for information, has to say about this, and then I'm gonna let you guys out of here. All right. Pork strikes and averts potential calamity for auto supply chain. Analysts anticipate a few supply chain issues as longshoremen return to work, though it will take a few weeks for port activity to return to normal. And this is from October 4th by John Irwin. The auto industry avoided months of potential supply chain bottlenecks and backlogs when the port strike on the eastern Gulf Coast ended after just 3 days. Automakers and suppliers dodged massive ripple effects that would have stemmed from a work stoppage that lasted even 1 week, analysts said, which should see very little impact to operations, said Michelle Drew Rodriguez, a partner at Consult Roland Berger's Chicago office. Dock workers returned October 4th, 3 days after strike impacting 36 ports from Maine to Texas began. The International Longshoremen's Association Union, which represents 45,000 port workers, and the U.S. Maritime Alliance Employer Group reached a tentative agreement on wages and agreed to extend the current master agreement until January 15th while negotiations continue on other issues. The strike threatened to deliver a major shock to global supply chains. The ports impacted by the strike accounted for about $37.8 billion of vehicle imports during 12 months ended June 30th, 2024, according to S&P Global Market Intelligence. About 70% of U.S. auto parts imports are also handled there, according to Alex Partners. This week has underscored the role a strong U.S. supply base plays in the national economy and our global competitiveness, said Bill Long, CEO of MEMA, which represents companies in the automotive supply chain, in a statement. The tentative agreement is for a wage hike for around 62%. A source familiar with the matter told Reuters. The employer group have offered a 50% raise leading up to the strike, far below the 77% the workers' union requested. Analysts had warned that a strike extending beyond even a week or so could prove extremely costly to the auto industry. A strike that long would force automakers and suppliers to seek alternate routes for shipping vehicles and parts. Shipping to ports in Canada or Mexico, diverted to the West Coast or non-union ports in the East, or delivering by air. Most of those options add significant costs and complexity to automotive supply chains, issues that a lengthy strike would have compounded, analysts said. Companies fear supply chain bottlenecks would eventually lead to sporadic assembly plant shutdowns in North America, and dealers monitored the impact of the strike on imported vehicle inventory, particularly for union brands such as European brands such as Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and Volkswagen. Clearing the backlog. Those threats have receded, but potential snags remain. The 3-day strike means it will take about 3 weeks for backlogs to clear and for port operations to return to normal, according to Everstream Analytics. 3 days turns into 3 weeks? That's crazy. Dock workers were already making progress the morning after the tentative agreement. The number of container ships waiting outside eastern Gulf Coast ports decreased to 54 the morning of October 4th, after peaking at 59 the day before, as ships began moving into ports in anticipation of working resuming, Everstream said. In comparison, just 3 vessels waited to unload at ports before the strike began on September 29th. About 386,000 20-foot equivalent cargo containers were waiting on ships outside those ports on October 4th, down from 406,000 a day earlier, Everstream said. Damn. As ports sort through their backlogs, the auto industry should escape with few issues, said Sam Farini, Vice President of Global Vehicle Forecasting at Auto Forecast Solutions. Planned contingencies in the supply chain and with vehicle deliveries should mean a quick return to normal, he said. The strike served as a fire drill for the industry, said Dan Hershich, America's leader of the automotive and industrial practice at Alex Partners. You practice fire drills so that when something really happens, you're ready for it, he said. Companies that paid attention well ahead of time were able to get inventory in place, now see that they're likely to read for an event like this in the future, he said. Those that didn't and lost sleep, I bet they're getting really serious about their plans, he said. This could really hit them next time. And there will be a next time. External shocks to the supply chain are happening rapidly and will require companies to be adaptable, said Roland Berger's Rodriguez. Those that are able to proactively identify and reduce disruption will win, she said. As companies prepare for the new January 15th deadline, the strike should be a reminder of how important dock workers are to the global supply chain, Farini said. The hope remains that the brief interruption will be all that's necessary to get a contract signed. And that is that. All right, so What are we talking about? They gave them a little bit of money. They told them, hey, this other stuff, we'll holler at you in about January. We'll let you know. And they're going to let them know now. Because they can't stop automation. They can't give them 77%. They probably couldn't even give them the 63% they gave them. And they're not going to see that until they start collecting these checks with those amounts. Now, mind you, if 63% over 6 years really can be cut down a decent amount so it doesn't hurt in the beginning, just like the UAW situation. But though that was kind of immediate. In this situation, they got a little time to work with. They could play around a little bit with it. But that was the same situation with the UAW. You see where I'm going with this? I'm telling y'all, our world is, the American way of life is crumbling. And we're watching it in real time. We watched the UAW and the Stellantis and the Big Three crumble the automotive industry. We're about to watch the longshoremen and the ports crumble the import-export industry. What's next? You know what? They don't accept our dollar in a whole bunch of countries now. Man, look. I don't know if it's America becoming weaker or America just making a whole bunch of bad decisions. But we are in a downward spiral that has not let up for quite some time, guys. And and what happened, and by January 15th, what's going to be? Is the president going to be elected by then? I'm telling y'all, man. When they talking about shit over there, look the other way. Because it's always a distraction from something else. You see, we ain't talked about P. Diddy. All right, guys, I'm out of here. This is Chris Surratt. Thank you for tuning to another episode of the Car Concierge Show. Please like, share, subscribe, check out the show, check out the other episodes, and I'm out. Peace.